Hi, and welcome. My name is Dr. Debbie Koyman with liveyourlifefully.com, and I would like to talk to you today about primary versus secondary emotions. So, this is a distinction that you might not have heard before, but I think as you'll come to discover, it's an important distinction that helps us to better understand our emotions and how and why we react to our emotions in certain ways. So, let me first start with primary emotions. So, primary emotions are normal, natural emotions that any of us and all of us feel as human beings. Let me give you some examples. So, when we lose something that's important to us, we feel sadness. When something's not fair or not okay, we feel angry. When we're threatened, we feel fear. These are normal, natural emotions that, again, all of us as human beings feel. And with primary emotions, if we express them appropriately, they will always go in a wave. They will increase, crest, and then they will decrease. If we express them appropriately, they will always go in a wave. So those are primary emotions. The second type is secondary emotions, and these are very different from primary emotions in a couple of really important ways. So, our secondary emotions are typically either reactions to our primary emotions or judgments about our primary emotions that creates a different set of emotions. Let me give you a couple examples of this. One really common example in our society is when we have the primary emotion of fear. People don't like to feel fear. And so a lot of times that will go over into anger. And this is really readily seen in road rage when we're driving. So let's say you're driving, somebody cuts you off, almost gets in an accident. The natural response is fear because we're threatened. We're in a car, something very, especially driving high speed at fast speeds, something just minor can cause an accident, which is threatening to us. And so we naturally would feel fear. But for various reasons, people don't often feel that fear, and it goes over into anger instead. And they have this road rage, and they're screaming and cussing and chasing the other car down, and expressing all of this anger, even though what they initially felt was fear, even if they don't necessarily recognize it. And as you can see in this example, what can happen with and what usually does happen with secondary emotions is unlike the primary emotions, which, like I said earlier, does the wave. Um, Secondary emotions will either spin in circles or they will just keep escalating. And part of why this happens is because the primary emotion, again, does the wave, but when we go into secondary emotions, the energy from the primary emotion gets stuck. And that energy then feeds over into the secondary emotion. And because the primary emotion isn't getting expressed, that's why the secondary emotion either spins in these circles or just keeps escalating because the primary emotion is continually feeding more emotion and energy into the secondary emotion. And what happens typically is people are more aware of and sometimes only aware of their secondary emotions. So they try to problem solve to the secondary emotions. And what happens is it's completely ineffective because what is really going on is there's a primary emotion that's not being addressed. And um, maybe you can think of a time in your life when you felt where your emotions were just spinning out of control or they were just getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, no matter what you were trying to do. Again, they just kept getting worse, kept getting more intense, kept spinning out of control. And if you can think of one of these times, what most likely was happening was you were having a secondary emotional response. Something had happened that created a primary normal emotion, and for whatever reason, and there's various reasons for this, the primary emotion didn't get expressed and it went over into these secondary emotions. And again, if you can think of some of those times, that's probably what was happening, and that's probably why whatever you were doing didn't work. The good news is that we can learn more about primary emotions, and we can learn to identify our primary emotions better and then express our primary emotions. And once we're able to do that, or as we're able to do that, then we don't get caught up in these secondary emotions so much. And part of why this is important is the secondary emotions often cause most of our suffering. Um, let's say with grief. Grieving is already an intense, difficult, painful emotion. Requires all of our resources to deal with the grief. And it's something we're capable of dealing with. All of our bodies are designed to cope with all of our emotions by nature. We have all of the capacity within our bodies already to deal with that. But what happens is we'll take grief, which is already painful, and the secondary emotions make it more painful. So what will happen is not only will I have the grief, but now I have anger, or I have guilt, or because I'm pushing away my grief, I might have depression or numbness or these other feelings that take, let's say grief is, you know, up at 7, 8 emotion. And these secondary emotions now create 10, 12, 14 of intensity. It makes it much, much worse. And when people are suffering emotionally, a lot of times the suffering is actually coming from the secondary emotions that are causing the pain and suffering. So, this is just a brief, kind of relatively brief introduction to primary, secondary emotions. I'll probably do some more videos to expand a little bit on that, but hopefully that helps you understand your emotions a little bit better. What I would encourage you to do is when you notice the spinning or escalating of your emotions, to try to recognize that and stop, take a time out, realize you're probably in secondary emotions, and see if you're able to backtrack to when that started and see if you can identify what the primary emotion might have been. If you're able to, try to deal with that primary emotion, express that primary emotion, and see if these other emotions go down. If you're having a difficult time discovering what your primary emotions are, give yourself some time, be patient. I would encourage you to look up some feeling words lists, have some feeling words in front of you that you can pick and choose from. A lot of us don't have really good feeling vocabularies. And of course, if you're in therapy, you can certainly talk to your counselor, your therapist about it. I know this is something I work a lot with, and the people I work with, we talk a lot about primary, secondary emotions, and I help them to try to distinguish between their secondary and primary emotions. Of course, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions as well. I might not be able to help you specifically identify what your emotions are, but if you have some more general questions, I'd be happy to help you. I can talk to a counselor if you have a friend who's good at emotions. You might be able to talk to them as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope this helps. Thanks.